I am not mad, no, not mad. Indeed, you must understand first that I am not mad, for madness would excuse nothing, and I would not have you mistake explanation for insanity. My senses, I tell you, are acute beyond ordinary measure. They are sharpened, honed until every whisper becomes a shout, every footstep a percussion, every hush a chorus. I can hear the faintest murmur in the next room, the distant drip of water like a metronome, the scuff of a mouse across a floorboard, and, most unbearably, the subtle cadence of the human heart. Listen, then, and you shall see that what I did was born of a perception so heightened that it became a kind of persecution. There was an old man in the house, an old man who had never wronged me, who had been gentle and harmless in all his ways. I had no lust for his silver nor desire for his gold, yet there existed within his face one thing, one singular feature, that pricked me as a thorn pricks the finger, his eye. Imagine, if you can, a pale and vulturous orb, milky in its haze, cold and dead as a winter pond, an eye that, when it gazed upon me, seemed to see through to the marrow of my thoughts, to paralyze the very blood in my veins. That eye was not merely an organ, it was an accusation, a verdict delivered without words, and because I could not endure being judged by such a thing, because its steady, blank stare gnawed at the roots of my courage, I resolved to rid the world of its accusation altogether. For 7 nights, observe the patience of the planning, I crept as a shadow, a thief of silence, at the stroke of midnight. Each night I placed my lantern outside his door, the flame hidden beneath a cloth so that only a wafer, thin ray would pierce the darkness. Each night I drew the latch with a breath so measured you could have heard a pin fall in the next county. I tell you I was never more focused, never more cunning, for what was required was not haste but a surgeon's calm. Haste would betray me, clumsiness would bring suspicion, and suspicion would undo all, yet every night the eye remained closed, the lids like curtains, the old man's face slack with sleep, and I could not, would not, strike upon an eye that was not open to hate me. How cruel, how strange was fate that made the very thing I despised so often asleep, and thus unreachable. My discipline grew raw with waiting. Each night I rehearsed the moment in my mind, the lift of the cloth, the revealed glare, the strike, the end. I counted the heartbeats of the house itself until their rhythm became a drumbeat in my blood. My anticipation, once a quiet ember, became a conflagration. Then came the 8th night. My hand cold, steady, certain, opened the door, slower than any previous motion of mine. I have told you I am not mad, and yet I confess my heart that night leaped with that strangest mixture of dread and exhilaration. The old man, perhaps stirred by the subtlest breeze, perhaps by a dream, sat up in bed and whispered into the dark, "Who's there?" Such a simple question, and yet it split the silence like a cracked bell. For an hour we stayed like statues, he listening in dread, I frozen in the shadow, while the house seemed to hold its breath, and time itself stretched thin as glass. In that hour the old man's pulse became audible to me, as if he had placed a drum upon his chest, the beat a punctuated terror that pricked my ears and quickened my own blood. O God, that sound! It was a living thing, a creature that whispered to me and at once roused a tempest in my mind. Then, by a slip of fate or a slight trembling of my hand, the lantern's thin ray fell across his face, and there it was, the foul, pale eye, wide open and fixed upon me with such absolute, empty stare that for an instant all my purpose wavered. Rage surged then like molten iron. Every nerve I possessed leapt into being. I saw in a flash the old man's life, the cruelty of that silent accusation, and I felt the terrible compulsion to end it. The heart beat faster, thump, 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 each blow as if to warn the world of what I was about to do. With one wild cry I sprang forward, seized him, dragged him upon the floor, and pressed the bedstead down upon him. He struggled, oh how he struggled, mouth opening like a bird's in panic, limbs flailing, but the weight and my resolve closed about him. And then mercy, no. Then silence descended, the kind of silence that follows thunder and leaves the air cold. The eye was still. The thing that had hunted my sleep had been stilled. Cleverness followed cruelty. I, who had been patient, became fastidious. I dismembered the body with cold, methodical hands, cartilage yielding beneath the blade, the small, irreverent anatomy of a human reduced to pieces that would not betray me if hidden. I packed those pieces beneath the floorboards as one places valuables in a chest, careful, precise, as if concealing a secret treasure, and closed the boards without a spot to hint at the horror. Beneath, there was no smell to betray, no trickle of blood, not even the shadow of a stain. I tell you, I was triumphant. I felt as if I had outwitted the very world. But triumph is a thin garment beneath it. Unease breeds. Evening folded into night, night into the thin blue hour before dawn, and at 4 o'clock a rap sounded upon the door. There came 3 officers in answer to a neighbor's cry. They entered with the casual gravity of men called to duty. They spoke, they laughed, they sat, and I, in a pose of insolent composure, welcomed them. I led them through the rooms, pointed out the trinkets, the gold, the old man's untouched bed, and all the while my heart, oh, my heart, beat not with fear of discovery, but with a new, more delicate terror. I seated myself among them, directly above the horror I had hidden, and their conversation washed around me like benign waves. At first I joined with them in smiling assurance, that brilliant mask of innocence, and they were deceived, for my outward voice was light and my eyes calm. Yet beneath that calm a sound began to creep, first faint as a thread of sound, then swelling. It was like the beating of a drum at the far end of a valley, faint but steady and impossibly close. I tried to tell myself it was my fancy, some trick of the nerves, but the noise swelled. It was the beating of a heart. No, not his now, but some echo planted in my own breast, reverberating until it seemed the very floor would ring with it. My blood turned to ice. The polite smiles of the officers seemed ghastly and false as masks. They sat, unmoved, talking of mundane things while that terrible pulse grew into a thunder within my skull. The sound mocked me, and I, who had murdered in silence, found myself suffocated by the silence made audible. I choked on my composure. My cheeks burned, my hands trembled, my voice grew thin. They must hear it, I raged. They mocked me by pretending not to notice. The mockery compounded the torment until every nerve snapped. I could contain myself no longer. I sprang to my feet, and with the voice of a man unmade I cried, "Yes, yes, I killed him. Tear up the floorboards. There it is. The beating, the hideous beating of his heart." And in that confession my dam broke, spilling the truth as if speech alone could purge the sound that had ruined me. Thus the murderer is undone, not by footprints, not by witness, but by the relentless, accusing drumbeat of conscience, the one sound no concealment can drown.